Today we're going to be talking about 15 fun traditions and things you'll experience in the military that are incredibly fun and you're never warned about them prior to joining the service. For context, I was active duty in the Marine Corps for 13 years, then I did 2 years in the reserves. I also spent 3 of those years as a recruiter, so I know a little bit about this game, and we're going to dig right in with number 1, Field Day. Now, for my veterans in the room, you probably just had a flashback, but Field Day is this really fun thing where you get to come together and clean your room every week. And most of the units I was in, that was every Thursday night, and you'd get off work and you'd have time to go eat chow or whatever, and you'd come back to your barracks room and you'd clean. And it would not be this little dust for 20 minutes, call it a day, go do whatever you wanted. It was like full-blown tear your room apart, with inspections that night to make sure you passed before the inspection the next morning when, God forbid, maybe First Sergeant or Sergeant Major is walking through rooms to make sure they're clean enough for your standard. Now, for reference, depending on what unit you're in and how bad the shape of your barracks is, these can get very intense. In fact, sometimes if people really messed up, you'd get what we call white glove inspections, where they'd put on the white glove from your dress blue uniform and they'd go through and they'd check for dust. And this is every bit as intense of an inspection as you can imagine. It's not always fun. However, it does mean that your room is clean, and if you pass, you then go about your merry way. And honestly, as much as we don't necessarily love Field Day, having everybody in the hallway cleaning together and whatever had its weird form of camaraderie that I actually did enjoy, especially when I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. We turned Field Day fun, but when you mess it up, it's not fun. So, it is what it is. Number 2 is a health and comfort inspection. A health and comfort inspection is a battalion level inspection where often, in fact, I believe it's required that military police are brought in, sometimes with dogs, and basically they go through your room and they make sure that you're living healthy and comfortable lives. At least that's how it's portrayed. But these are the inspections where people get caught with all kinds of contraband and things they shouldn't have. I've seen Marines get caught with drugs in their rooms. I've seen Marines get caught with pets they weren't supposed to have in their barracks rooms. I've seen Marines get caught with firearms they weren't supposed to have in their rooms. Hell, I've even seen Marines get caught with, we'll just say, females that they weren't supposed to have in their rooms during health and comfort inspections. It is what it is. Bottom line is, if you're living life the way you're supposed to be living life and obeying all the rules in the barracks and keeping a clean room, you have nothing to worry about. In fact, I went through a couple of health and comfort inspections. Really, I think in my 13 years, I think I saw 2. And I nothing to worry about. Passed both, flying colors, no problems. But if you're doing things you shouldn't be in your barracks room, maybe you have alcohol in there underage or whatever, you know what you can and can't have in your room. If you're violating that and they come through, it doesn't look good. Number 3 is mandatory fun days. These are essentially unit morale days where the unit might say, hey, we're going to go to this lake for the day, and they might bus you there and you drink and have fun and hang out and come back. And generally, these are actually somewhat fun days. What makes them kind of dreaded is that your attendance is mandatory, hence mandatory fun days. And because the entire command is there, you can't really let loose at the level that you might want to with your bros and broskies and female bros and whatever. But then also sometimes the unit in their, I don't want to say wisdom, I don't know, dumbassery, whatever you would call it, decides to do these after hours. I have seen these done on evenings and or weekends, and that is, I just can't understand where leadership would think that forcing you to spend your day off with your unit is somehow good for morale. But I did a couple of these where it was like a Friday, and it would be like first thing in the morning, they'd bus us out. Like I did one when I was with 1st Marine Division where they bussed us to Mission Viejo, which is this beautiful area, San Diego County. I guess technically it's Orange County. And we went to this lake and we drank and had fun and whatever, and they bussed us back. And they let us drink on the bus there, they let us drink on the bus back. We had a great freaking time, and then they dropped us off before the end of what would normally be a Friday work day, and we were all really just basically hung out of the barracks room and kept partying all night, and that was a good one. So it really just depends on how the command sets these up. These can be a lot of fun, sometimes not so much. Number 4 is uniform inspections. You will do these. They will be painful. It is what it is. If your uniform is good, great. Usually these are done before a ceremony or a change of command or the Marine Corps ball, where they just want to make sure that everybody's stuff looks good before you end up in front of the command, because there's not much worse for a leader than having you guys out at a change of command and somebody's missing their tie on their bravos. There's not much worse than, you get out to do uniform inspections and someone's missing their ribbons or missing their tie, or, their core frames are destroyed, or like they're just missing a very blatantly obvious piece of the uniform that could have been avoided. And then you look like crap as a leader for not checking your Marines, right? It is what it is. Number 5 here, in the kind of the similar vein, is gear inspections. Anytime you go to do a deployment or a field training exercise or whatever, you're going to get a packing list, and then your leaders are going to make sure that you packed everything accordingly. And this usually means you pack everything, and then you have to drag it out of your room, dump it out, and they'll usually have like a picture. You have to lay it out exactly like that freaking picture, and then they go through and they're like, do you have it? You hold it up. Do you have it? You hold it up. Do you have it? You hold it up. And then once you're all packed or all good, you like stuff it all back in as fast as possible. Now, these really aren't that terrible. And when you think about the fact that like this is your job for the day, is just making sure you have all your gear, like there are certainly worse things in the world. Like I think the worst version would be you don't do a gear inspection. You work all day doing your actual job, whatever that may be, and then you have to pack that night and you get out to the training exercise or deployment and realize you're missing something that's actually important, like your sleeping bag, and now you're freaking miserable for the entire week. And it all could have been avoided if instead of work, they replaced that with making sure you had your stuff. Like the gear inspection is not fun, but doing a gear inspection instead of your job is not the worst thing in the world if it's during the day, right? Probably the worst part about this is having to like feel pressure to pack your stuff back in as fast as possible if you're like the last one getting inspected, and then you don't generally have it packed as well as it was before you brought it out to the inspection. Number 6 here, kind of in the same vein, is SIF turn-in. Now, this is another one where veterans watching this probably just had a shiver go down their spine. SIF is the Central Issue Facility, and I believe they actually changed it to IF, which is the Individual Issue Facility. I don't know, name. But basically, this is where you get all your gear. So in the Marine Corps, and I'm sure every other unit, you go and you get all your gear issued to you every time you check into a unit. And that's going to be different depending on the unit. Like if you go to an infantry unit, you're going to get all of your combat loadout. If you go to a truck unit, you'll probably get, call it 60 or 70% of your stuff, because you're not going to need the full combat loadout. Like you won't need the bulletproof plates unless you're actually going on a deployment, right? So depending on what your job is, like if you're admin, you're going to get even less gear, most likely, than, the motor T unit. So depending on your job, you'll get different levels and different types of equipment. And then when you're done with that unit and you go to the next unit, you have to turn it all in. Now, that's not the end of the day if you didn't use it, especially if you like left it in the wrappers and it's all perfectly clean. You go in, you're like, hey, I've got this thing, it's clean, here you go. And maybe you forgot something and you have to come back. One time I got to a unit and I put everything into the ILB, which was our, main like backpacking backpack that we had at the time. Put everything in there. Didn't open anything, didn't take anything out. When it got time to check out of the unit, like a year later or whatever, and I go and I take the backpack back and I just pulled everything out and they checked everything off the list and I was done. But then other times, you'd use the items, and then they'd get dirty, and then you have to clean all of them, and you have to find things that are missing. For example, the stuff that we had in Afghanistan was filthy, and you would just soak it and put it in the washing machine and run it, or maybe you like scuzz brush and soap, and you're just rubbing the heck out of it, and there are just stains you can't really get out. Or maybe you get blood in it. Like, it's just not always easy to clean this stuff, and they will turn it away for any marks because it's going to go to somebody else, right? And if it's damaged, you have to do a damaged gear statement. If it's missing, you have to do a missing gear statement. Both of those go through your chain of command, and then your command gets billed for the item and whatever. And so SIF inspections, depending on how much you actually used your equipment, can turn into a 2, 3, 4, 5 visit ordeal that gets very painful as you're trying to turn in maybe even just one last item and it keeps getting failed and it gets irritating. It is what it is. Number 7 is libo briefs. Every single Friday or weekend, the day before the weekend, you're going to get a Liberty brief. And this is usually going to be a full formation, and maybe it's your gunnery sergeant or your first sergeant or your sergeant major and then their officer, right? So depending if it's a small unit, like a normal weekend, you might just be like, your staff sergeant or gunny and like the lieutenant or captain, and they have to tell you all the things. But if it's like a big, like 3 or 4 day weekend, it's going to be the entire battalion or regiment, and it's going to be, first sergeant, sergeant major, and the freaking lieutenant colonel, and they're going to sit there for 30 minutes and tell you basically like, don't drink, don't drive, don't be an idiot, like basically adult stuff. Because anytime that one of you goes out and gets a DUI or something, it comes back to the command, it wakes them up all weekend, and obviously it makes you look like an asshole, but it makes them look like an asshole. It's this whole thing. And so the solution that the military has decided is to just beat you over the head with right and wrong every single weekend, and it gets very painful. These are often very redundant, repetitive. In fact, I had a first sergeant, I'm not going to name him, but every single libo brief was the exact same thing. He would say, if you drink, don't drive. If you drive, don't drink. But they basically, your libo brief could basically be summed up as like, don't drink and drive, don't get, assault charges, don't beat your spouse, don't do drugs, and like, don't have unprotected. I don't know. They vary, but they get old, and inevitably someone's going to do something wrong one day anyway, and then you're going to get even worse briefs, even though they know that the brief isn't actually going to help anything. Number 8 here is, this is usually for like the 3 and 4 day libo periods. Oftentimes we would have to go and do like vehicle inspections. And this would be like your, corporal or sergeant has to come out and check your vehicle to make sure that, your headlights work and your high beams work and your blinkers work and your brake lights work and all the normal crap that any adult should have their car doing. Make sure you have valid insurance, driver's license, all the things. And then maybe a libo plan. Like if you're planning on doing something for the weekend, like what are you planning on doing? And all of this again stems from people doing really dumb stuff out in town, and then they just make it stricter, thinking that, hey, if we make you write down ahead of time what you're going to do, then maybe you won't be an idiot. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. Maybe it does on some level, maybe it deters some people, but case in point, let's see, last summer I ran the bulls in Pamplona, Spain. Right? I'm out of the military, so it doesn't matter, but it was dope. It was a bucket list item for me. It was super cool. And I'm there, and we're watching the bullfights that night, and this gentleman sits next to me, and, he's clearly American, and I'm like, oh, where are you from? He's like, oh, California. And I looked at him, and he had like a low fade and a mustache, and I was like, oh, you're a Marine. And he was like, is it that obvious? And then, we just had a conversation. And he was on leave. He was active duty. He was an infantry guy, and he was on leave, and I just looked at him, and I was like, I got $50 that says you did not tell your command that you were going to run the bulls on leave. And he laughed, and he's like, they know I'm in Spain. I was like, yeah, but you didn't tell them where. He's like, no, they know most of my plans. I was like, they don't know you're here right now. He's like, they don't know I'm here right now. So the guy had flown all the way to Spain. The whole point of his trip was to run the bulls, and he worked out an entire leave plan that did not include mentioning Pamplona or running the bulls, because he knew that his leave would be denied if he said he was going to go run in front of a bunch of bulls on vacation, right? Because no command is going to be like, oh yeah, that's totally cool, totally safe. People die doing that. We're fine with that. And so like people are just going to put whatever they got to put to pass the vehicle inspections and the holiday libo plan. But it is what it is, right? It's meant to keep you safe. Number 9 is 24-hour duty. You are going to, at some point in your career, have post. And if you're new to a unit or about to leave a unit, it'll probably be on a freaking holiday or maybe even on your birthday. And this is just a 24-hour post where you keep the watch. And depending on what your unit is, that could be a very important thing, or it could seem like you're basically just watching paint dry on a wall. I've even been in a command before where they wouldn't allow you to have a television in the room, and they wouldn't allow you to have books or magazines in the room. And so they were like, you can't read, you can't watch TV, phone watch, walk the building for 24 hours. That was the worst duty I ever had, because it was just like, this is pointless. Like, I can't even read a book from the recommended like professional reading list. Like, what possible thing could go wrong if I'm reading a book on Marine Corps leadership at post with the phone right there, as long as I'm still walking the building? Like, nothing's going to happen, but it is what it is. Some commands, it was super chill. Some commands, I had a TV, they had a sleeping post, I had books, I could even have my phone sometimes. Like, it really just depends, but you will at some point have 24-hour duty. It is what it is.
Most military finance books are trash. The one I wrote actually helps service members and vets. So scan the QR code, click the link down below in the description, and grab your free PDF before you waste another paycheck.
Number 10 is Gunny time, as we call it in the Marine Corps. I'm sure every other branch has a different name for it, but this is basically the idea that if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late, right? The military has a thing for being 15 minutes prior to everything, especially the Marine Corps. I've heard every other branch talk about this too, but the Marine Corps, certainly. So what'll happen is Gunny will say, hey, there's a regimental PT session tomorrow, right? So the whole regiments get together to run. Formation's at 6:30. And then he'll be like, so be there at 6:15. And then the staff sergeant will be like, I need everyone ready at 6:15 for the gunny. So I'll tell them to be here at 6. And then the sergeant will be like, hey, we got to be there at 6 for the staff sergeant. So I'll tell them to be there at 5:45. And so you might find yourself showing up at 5:30 or 5:45 for PT when you didn't actually need to be there until the 6:30 formation. Everybody wants to make sure everybody's there to impress their boss. It freaking is what it is. One of the first things I did when I got promoted to staff NCO was I stopped paying any attention to gunny time, and I'd be like, oh, cool, formation's at 6:30. I'll be there at 6:15 no matter who tells me what, because I am now in the gunny zone. It is what it is, though, because also, as dumb as it is to be there at 5:45 for 6:30, it's definitely dumber if it's 6:30 and you're missing somebody when Sergeant Major does accountability, right? And you have to explain you don't know where the freaking schmuckatelli is, and now you got to go find it. Number 11 is medical hit lists. These come out all the time, especially for like flu shots and vaccines, and maybe it's just your personal health assessment or whatever, PHA. But these lists come out every week. Hey, who's missing medical stuff? And they'll be like, hey, you got to go do this. And you're like, okay, cool. And then you forget. And then the next week they're like, hey, dumbass, go do this. And then you're like, okay, cool. And then you go do it. And then you forget to sign the logbook. And so then they're like, hey, idiot, you're still on this list. And you're like, but I went. And they're like, well, you're still on the list. And so then you have to go back and just be like, make sure I'm off the list. Like maybe you even signed the logbook and they forgot. But, you know, sometimes you go and they're like telling you have to get the flu shot again. And you're like, I got it last week. And it's like, well, it just didn't get documented. It didn't get taken off our list. And now we're angry. And it becomes this whole thing. So the medical hit list itself makes sense because it means like, hey, you got to get yourself taken care of. But sometimes it's more of a pain than it needs to be. Number 12 is the urinalysis hit list. Now, these are always a surprise. This is never like, hey, you got to do this sometime this week. This is always like, hey, it's Wednesday at 05:30 and you're getting a text message. You have to do the piss test this morning. And you're like, crap. And usually what happens is the text goes out to all the leaders with the list, and then you don't find out till like the moment you walk in the shop. And you'll walk in the shop. This is how it always happened for me. You walk in the shop and you're like, man, PT was great this morning. I just went to the chow hall and had some food. I'm going to go take a piss. And then you take a piss. And the moment you walk out of the bathroom, someone's like, you're on the piss list. Go. And then you have to like drink all the freaking water on the entire base and let it just sit. And you're just in line like, I got to wait. I can't go to the bathroom yet. But they won't let you leave because you got to go through the whole process to make sure you didn't take any drugs, right? You have clean urine. And then you're waiting on it to hit and waiting on it to hit and waiting on it to hit. And then finally it'll all hit and you have to go to the bathroom so bad. And then the urinalysis guy will have gone to chow and you have to go like try to balance. It's like perfect. Like I got to pee, but I got to make sure I'm back in time and still have to pee. And they'll sit the whole day and wait until you go to the bathroom. And the urinalysis test, at least in the Marine Corps, I think it's this way in the whole military because this is how they do it in MEPS, is like they got to watch the pee leave the body. So if you're a female, it's like sit down with the stall door open. And if you're a male, it's like someone's standing there like this. You gonna pee? You gonna go? I gotta watch you pee. Because they want to make sure it's actually your urine and you're not using one of those cheater bags and doing, steroids or drugs and then using somebody else's urine to pass the test. I think what's even worse than this is being the guy or girl doing the urinalysis test and having to watch everybody pee. That just sounds like a terrible job. Number 13 is change of command ceremonies. These suck. No, these look awesome sometimes. Like I went to one in Hawaii that was incredibly beautiful for a colonel changing over as the MAG 24 change of command or whatever. Sometimes these are super cool. And other times you just stand in formation forever. And it's usually like the hottest day of the year and you're wearing gear and carrying your rifle and trying to not pass out in formation and they just suck. But at the end of the day, we understand why they do these ceremonies. It means a lot to the leadership. So it's cool, but also it kind of sucks to be a part of. Number 14 is dog and pony shows. These are kind of the same thing. Like whenever the CG shows up, you got to like clean everything top to bottom the day before because God forbid the commanding general comes through and sees how you guys live on a normal basis. They want to see like the perfect prim example of everything shiny and beautiful and as brand new as possible so that when they leave, you can let it all fall back apart and then be like, why don't we get any funding? And you're like, well, we don't get any funding because every time the CG comes through and he's the one guy who can make a difference, we pretend everything's okay and clean it and fix it and hide all the broken stuff instead of saying, hey, sir, like we really need funding for these things. it is what it is, right? So dog and pony shows are fun. You get to clean all kinds of stuff. I've even gotten to sweep freaking parking lots before to remove rocks for people coming in. It's great. And number 15 is battalion moto runs. Those could be regimental moto runs, whatever, but these are like big formation runs. These are actually fun. Like if you like the cadence and the, sing song and the left, a left, right, lay-o, a low, right, lay-o, a left, right, lay-o, a lefty, righty, low, and all the fun like cadence stuff where you're like sing-songing back and forth and running in formation. Like these are actually pretty cool to watch. They're pretty cool to be a part of. I always liked singing cadence and being out in front, having a good time. These only really suck when, if it's like really hot or if you've been standing around in formation forever or whatever. But sometimes they're very slow and they do like the slinky effect, right? Where like if person 1 is moving at a steady pace, but then person 2 backs up a little bit and they do this, then person 3 is trying to keep up. And like by the time you get to the end, you're kind of just running the whole time trying to keep up. So they might be at like a steady, slow pace and you're doing this. And so you're like sprint slow. And so it can get kind of painful. And a lot of times it's just like trotting in place. We call it like the military shuffle, and you can get shin splints from it. So they're fun, but it's not exactly the best form of exercise, but they look cool. So it is what it is. Pros and cons. These are 15 things you'll probably experience in the military. Some of them are dope. Some of them are not. All of them you'll reminisce about when you get out of the service, and they're just part of life. So now you know. And if I missed something, if you're a veteran watching this and you're like, dude, I can't believe you missed this, comment it down below so I can add it to my next list. Have a great day. Make sure you're subscribed for more military information so you know what to expect when you join this great nation's armed forces.